Hello and welcome to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Joe Rimmer, your host today, and I'm joined by two of the finest. First of all, our full-time Liverpool reporter, both home and away, although right now, while the World Cup's on, it's pretty much home all the time, isn't it, Paul Gorst?
It is until next week, yeah.
And all, sorry, go on.
No, just very much home at the moment.
Very much home.
Been
Seen
a
you in the
while
office
since
a
I've
few
been away,
times.
Dodie.
You'll be headed away next week, though, won't you?
Yeah, off to Dubai Friday morning to follow Liverpool around like a bad smell around Dubai and see how we get on. A couple of friendlies and well, probably be quite an important training. Well, a couple of weeks of training for them before the return of the main stuff. So yeah, it should be good. And I think with Liverpool having pretty much a full complement of players there, that'll make the friendly seem a little bit more important, shall we say, and maybe a little bit more intense than what we'd normally get if they're playing in Thailand with most of the under-18s and 23s.
What's the little tournament called that they're playing in?
The Dubai Super Cup.
The Dubai Super Cup.
Yeah.
Be good to add that to the Anfield Trophy cabinet, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Along with the Thailand. Did they win the Thailand Super Cup in the summer? Or Singapore? What was it? Doyle, did they lift a trophy in the summer?
They got beat in the Bangkok match of the century.
Oh, yeah.
And then they beat Crystal Palace in the battle for eternity in Singapore. So that's what's going on.
Well, as you can all tell, that is also working full time. Well, sometimes he works full times. Other times he works slightly part time. Is our chief Liverpool reporter, also both home and away.
Can I just pick you up on that? If there's any part time out of us three, it's you, Joe.
Oh, thanks.
Masquerading as the big man. Come on.
There's nothing big about me. Go on. How are you, Doyle? You okay? Enjoying this World Cup?
I'm enjoying it. I'll be enjoying it even more after today because I'm off for a while. So
yeah, you can properly enjoy it while Doyle, my Ghosty goes off to Dubai. So, but most dramatic day probably the World Cup yesterday with the Japan game. What are we both thinking, Ghosty? What are you thinking of the World Cup at the moment? Have you enjoyed it? What have you thought of the football?
It's been difficult to get up for it, hasn't it? The best thing I can say for it is the game times and the group stages were 10 o'clock in the morning and then 4 and then 7. I just love that 7 o'clock kickoff slot. All your matches done and dusted before 9 o'clock, and then you can turn over to the White Lotus or whatever it is you're watching at the moment. So I'll say that for it. I quite enjoyed coming in the office and sticking a game on at 10 o'clock and having one of me two monitors dominated by the footy while I crack on the other monitor. But it's been hard getting into it, hasn't it, with so many issues around it, so many obviously serious issues around, just the Qatari stance on same-sex relationships and all the migrant workers who perished, putting the stadiums together. So it's been difficult to park that for me and get into it and truly kind of think, oh, this is a World Cup. So I haven't enjoyed it too much, if I'm being honest. But I think last night was certainly, a little bit more enjoyable. I just found a lot of the games have been a bit, sterile as well.
Isn't that always the case though in the World Cup, especially in the group stage? You're always going to get pretty sterile games, aren't you? I mean, and then you get the odd bit of drama like you did last night.
Yeah, but yesterday was good for the drama of it all. At one point Costa Rica and Japan were going through, and Spain and Germany were going out, and then they're all turned around. And Germany have gone out. I had Germany in the Echo sweepstake. They're nice, so they're out. But my Japanese boys are flying the flag for me, so at least I've still got a little bit of interest in it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the White Lotus there. I'm not going to hijack this podcast and talk all about that, but I really could. Doyle, did you enjoy the Germans going out last night?
No, why would anybody take any joy out of Germany being eliminated from any major competition, especially anybody from England? That's a terrible thing to say, Joseph. We're supposed to be bridging the divide. Europe united. It's what we voted for, wasn't it? Oh, yeah. Anyway, bit of politics there in this podcast. The World Cup, I think too many games have been really boring for me. And the reason they've been boring is because too many teams have just been defensive. Like Japan, there have been some good stories. Japan getting through, Saudi Arabia beating Argentina, even England winning against Iran 6-2. They're good stories, but too many of the teams are just... Look at Japan, I think, if they had the lowest percentage of any team ever since they started counting it to actually win a game in the World Cup, and they're the lowest two, the one against Germany, the one against Spain. I mean, obviously covering Liverpool, we see teams come to Anfield. Well, a bit less this season, but teams come to Anfield and just put everybody behind the ball and then hope for the best. And because teams have had no preparation time, it's a lot easier just to sort out defensively, just get players behind the ball. Harder to get your attacking patterns right. And I think possibly a bit later in the competition, some of the better teams will start performing a bit more. But said too many of the games have been a bit dull, and it hasn't helped that too many players have been playing for too long. You look at Belgium's team; they were terrible. They should have been not disbanded, but certainly some of them shouldn't have been playing anymore.
Disbanded. Disband Belgium as a country.
even Croatia, Modric, he's past his best. You could argue Messi, definitely Ronaldo. Suarez, although we're recording this, he'll probably go and score 5 against Ghana before saving 2 penalties, which he's not supposed to. And of course, there's so many good attackers out there. I think I worked it out that there were 8 forwards came on in the Champions League final. Obviously, Liverpool, Real Madrid in May, and 6 of them out there either not picked, not qualified, or got injured. So I do think that's something that is perhaps counted against it. But I know we don't agree on this, but I still think it's better than the Premier League, which I think is desperately done.
Well, I always think I think we look favourably on the World Cups because you think about the dramatic knockout moments. But just thinking back, and this is a random example off the top of my head, and I'm sure you can counter with other arguments. But I look back at 2002 in Japan and Korea, and I quite enjoyed that tournament. I don't really know why. I think it was just a strange kick-off times. But the group stage England played in, wasn't it? 0-0 against Nigeria, 1-1 against Sweden, and then the 1-0 win against Argentina. And I just. That's how I always see the group stage of the World Cup, as just a really sort of sterile exercise where usually the better teams just about squeak through, and there's the odd shock, but by and large the lower ranked teams all sort of pile out, and then you get the one team that gets through, like South Korea did that year, and they sort of become the narrative for the knockout stages until the best team wins it. And I don't know, I just don't find the World Cup and international football in general that exciting until you get to those bigger games. And when Brazil play France or whoever, it generally is all right. But I know what you mean. But Belgium have never been great to watch in recent years, and I think that's fair to say. And Argentina aren't exactly the most exciting. So anyway, but no one wants to sit here and talk about the World Cup for that long, so we'll move on. And we're going to talk about Fans Football of the Year, because Reach, for the 3rd year running, is running their own Fans Football of the Year award. There are 2 awards. There's a national one, which Mohamed Salah is almost guaranteed to win. He's won the last 2, and I believe he's probably going to be out in front in the voting for this one. But there's also a local one, so we'll talk a bit more about that and the Liverpool contenders for that award. So, Dory, I'll stay with you because we're going to give our own contenders early next week, and spoilers for the written side of things. I know you're going to go for Alisson, aren't you? And I massively agree. But just give us the reasons why you think Alisson has been Liverpool's MVP of 2022.
Never say MVP again. Thank you very much. Not in the context of football. I think the reason I chose Alisson is because when we got asked the question, I was the first one to answer. I think everybody else would have said Alisson. We can't choose the same person. Sorry, Ghosty. But Alisson, well, just this season alone, if it wasn't for him, Liverpool, while they've been in a bit of a struggle this season, it wasn't for him to be in a worse situation, certainly in the Premier League. I know we don't really like to talk too much about stats, certainly expected goals and stuff like that. It's certainly out of context, but there is a certain value when you do put them into context. And in terms of the shots that he's faced, I think Alisson has saved more expected goals than any other goalkeeper in the Premier League, but by a long way, like by about 5 goals, or certainly almost double the next person in line, which I think might be Pickford. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be Pickford, but that kind of underlines what he's been like. I mean, but you don't need the stats to see what he's done. And this is just talking the last 3 or 4 months. At the end of last season, he was integral to Liverpool. He saved the penalty in the FA Cup final, didn't he? So he helped them win that. No, he didn't play in the League Cup final, but he played in the semi-final against Arsenal, didn't he? I think he may have played in the second leg. I think he's played in what? Yes, he's played in the second leg, which obviously Liverpool got through then as well. He made did he make a good save from Odegaard or someone like that? I seem to recall that could have been the league game around that time as well. To be fair, but just his overall performances. I mean, if you look at Brazil, there was a time when possibly Ederson was the first choice goalkeeper, or the pair of them were competing. And Ederson is a very good goalkeeper, but now Alisson is quite clearly the number one there, and he's the number one goalkeeper in the Premier League. And there's an argument to say, I'd say he's the best goalkeeper in the world. I think Liverpool were unlucky in the Champions League final. They came up against Courtois, who had a very good game. He's a good goalkeeper, but we saw in the World Cup just recently that just because you're a good goalkeeper doesn't mean you can't make mistakes on the big stage. And the problem for Liverpool is that Courtois made it in the World Cup rather than the Champions League final. But Alisson, going back to him, all the way through the season, all the way through, the second half of last season, because this is obviously based on the year as a whole, there isn't any goalkeeper who can touch him really. Although because of what happened in the Champions League final, Courtois has been taking all the main honours. I'd have said it was Alisson. So if he's the best, it's very rare that Liverpool have had the best player in a particular position in the world. But under Jurgen Klopp, they've had the best defender in Virgil van Dijk. They've had the best attacking right back in Trent. They've had the best, at one point, certainly last year, best player in the world in Salah. And now they've got the best goalkeeper. But Alisson's probably been the best goalkeeper for 3 or 4 years now.
Gorsty, Alisson, I've got a little theory on goalkeepers that they have careers, especially the good ones, that follow the same pattern, which is the best in the scene. Everyone gets very excited about them, or they go to a club and everyone gets very excited about them. And then we take them for granted for ages until towards the end of their careers when they're still 36, 37, still doing really good stuff. Then they leave and you go, oh my God, they were really good. Has Alisson reached that bit of a stage in his career where perhaps not Liverpool fans, but certainly the wider football world would take him for granted a little bit, do you think?
Yeah, I think he might be a little bit slightly underrated from fans outside the kind of Liverpool bubble, because you don't see him making too many wonder saves. If you put a highlight reel together of Alisson saves, they'd all be kind of just like smothering the angle of a one-on-one and staying big and staying on his feet. He doesn't really make a save from 25 yards and he's got his fingertips to it or anything like that. He tends to just do everything to a really high standard, so he doesn't have to. Whether it's just shuffling to his left a little bit earlier than another goalkeeper might, so it makes the save look a little bit more comfortable. So I think he might even be a little bit underrated from outside of Liverpool. People who watch Liverpool every week. I mean, he's been outstanding, hasn't he? Just so difficult to get past. When you think you've finally broken the rear guards of Van Dijk and Matip or Canate or whoever it is, and then you still got to get past Alisson. It's one of the reasons why Liverpool had the best defensive record in Europe's top 5 leagues last season. Them alongside Man City, I think they conceded 25 or something goals. That was the lowest out of all the top 5 leagues, and Alisson was instrumental in that. So. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with Doyley's take, only that I've got to, because he's written about Alisson, so I'm going to have to write about someone else. So it's a weird one, really, because you can kind of look at Liverpool. This is obviously a calendar year thing, isn't it? So the first half of this year, Liverpool were absolutely flying, weren't they, and putting together some of the best performances and results that you've seen. And then since August, they've been on a little bit of a rocky road, so it's a difficult one to judge in terms of picking an absolute outstanding candidates. And I probably would go with Alisson, but as a result, I'll have to go with someone else. So we'll see what we come up with next week.
Yeah, well, Doyley, in all your years watching football since it was invented in the late 1800s, have you seen a better player in one-to-ones than Alisson?
Let me just wrap my brain. Did they have goalkeepers in the 1700s? I'm not sure.
Lev Yashin, did you watch him live?
How old do you think I am? You've got to be nearly 40 anyway. You certainly look it. It's been a tough time for you the last couple
of years. In the early half of my 30s, I'll have you know.
I don't believe that for a second. Come on. What was the question? Oh, yeah. In terms of one-to-ones, well, Schmeichel's the other one, isn't it? I mean, they were the two. I do think Alisson, I agree with what Gorsty said in terms of he is not appreciated perhaps as much outside of Anfield as he is inside of Anfield, or Liverpool supporters anyway. But I do think that's changed a little bit. And I think certainly if Brazil do really well in the World Cup, it'll change then as well. Suddenly people will start going, oh, look at this. It's like, well, hang on. He's already won all these competitions and he's done all these saves and he's kept these clean sheets. He's got these records. So, what have you been doing? The other thing as well, obviously, he fits into Liverpool's style of play because he's a sweeper keeper. Although no one says that anymore because so many of them are, and that he's very good with his feet. And he's got that great trait that it's an interesting one with goalkeepers. Some goalkeepers they look really good because they play in teams that give away loads of chances and they get a chance to make loads of saves. Like they might be man of the match in a 4-0 defeat, which is, good for your reputation. Not so great if you're playing for a leading club because they might not give away loads of chances. There might only be like 2 chances or somebody gets a chance. I'm thinking of go back to the Napoli game in the Champions League in 2018, that group stage where I think he had next to nothing to do. Liverpool go 1-0 ahead. At the end, Milik has that chance and he makes the save. And that's concentration levels that it's just doing the basics right and then being ready for when you need to be called upon. And that's what he's very, very good at. And that's why he's at a big club and why he's one of those few goalkeepers who can do that because of his concentration levels and that he's always on top of his game. Like any keeper, he makes mistakes. But the fact that such a big deal are made about them when he does underlines that he doesn't make that many.
He's hugely calm as well, isn't he? I mean, when he does make a mistake, you don't often see his performance levels dip, do you?
Not really. I mean, and the fact that one of the most notable things about his World Cup so far is that he had a lovely tash for a bit. So, otherwise they've not got much else to speak about him because I don't even think he's had a shot to save, has he? In the 2 games where we've been recording this, I don't think the opponents have had a shot on target.
Been very solid Brazil, haven't they? Rather than flashy so far, they seem to be a more functional outfit than I expected them to.
But it's all those United players, isn't it? Any team's going to become functional when they're in it.
Of course, if you'd have been quicker in the WhatsApp group, you'd have had Alisson, but you weren't. So who have you ended up with and why do you think they're in with a shout of being Liverpool fans?
Yeah, I think the initial list was from something I put together. And I think I chose Thiago, Diaz, Salah, Alisson, and was that it? Was that the list in total? I was weighing up going with Luis Diaz because it's slightly easier to judge him because he's literally only been here since January, hasn't he, or the beginning of February? So it's easier to look at his Liverpool career in that kind of time capsule as opposed to Salah at the beginning of the year was coming off that end of year form and carrying it in, but then he had the Africa Cup of Nations, didn't he? But I've eventually gone with Salah just because I don't think he was at his scintillating best once he got back from the Africa Cup of Nations, and I can't remember the facts and the stats around his participation for Egypt in that tournament. I did do something on it a couple of weeks ago, but basically he played pretty much every minute. He got brought off in the 18th minute of one of the games, and he played every other minute, and every single knockout game they had went to penalties. So I think when he came back from that, he was absolutely drained, wasn't he? But I think he was still desperate to show that he wasn't, and almost as a result was trying too hard. So I think he only scored 8 of his 31 goals from February onwards, which shows you how good he was in the first half of that season. But then I just think this season he's picked up a little bit, hasn't he, after a bit of a slow start, which everyone has endured. And is he on 14 now for the season? So across the calendar year, he's getting close to 25 goals. He might still even finish 2022 with 25 or more, mightn't he? So I think he hasn't been at his absolute best that he was possibly around about 12 months ago, a little bit more, but still possibly done enough to earn a nod as well. And if it's a public vote, we know there is a door in public out in Egypt will eventually make sure that he wins anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, Doyle, that whenever we talk about Salah and we sort of, you calculate his goals there, and Gorsty's going, oh well, he wasn't at his scintillating best, but he's got 25 this year. I mean, he's going to have 25 goals in a calendar year. He always just keeps these levels, doesn't he? These incredible levels. Whether he seems to be playing well or badly, he scores goals, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he always posts the numbers, doesn't he? I mean, we thought for a little while that perhaps he was slowing down, and then look what he's done over the past, before the season stopped. In those 2 months, he scored most of his goals then. So he keeps on delivering in the big games. Winner against Man City, scored in the Community Shield against them as well. So he's still the go-to man for Liverpool when it comes to goals. He's usually playing in a slightly different position, but I think obviously with Núñez coming in and Mane going, Liverpool and Diaz and Jota haven't been out. They're still trying to fathom a way about to get the best out of the forwards they got available. Liverpool did kind of strike on something towards the end of that first part of the season. Of course, he scored the 2 goals at Tottenham as well. The big win there, a massive win. That might end up being for Liverpool's season, certainly giving them a bit of momentum going into the second part of the season. So, he's been like that from day one. Was he scored in his debut against Watford, wasn't it, away? Should remember I was there. And since then, he hasn't really stopped. I mean, of course, he's had a bit of a dip after what happened to Egypt, and of course what happened in the World Cup qualifier as well.
Yeah,
the whole lights thing, which would have been exceptionally annoying at the time, but then would have been even more annoying afterwards when you think about it for him. But he still helped Liverpool get to a Champions League final, win an FA Cup, although of course he came off. Did he come off in the final or the semi-final? Can't remember now.
It
was the final, wasn't it? It was the final, wasn't it? Yeah, because Van Dijk came off. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. How long ago does that seem like, by the way? like a different decade, let alone the same year. So
there has been 1 million games this year.
Well, that's it. It doesn't feel as though it's actually stopped. This season just was a continuation of last season. So certainly for Liverpool. And I think, again, look, I'd love to know. I haven't done this research myself ahead of this. How many games Salah actually played in between January he played at Chelsea, January the 1st or 2nd, I can't remember. I think it was the 2nd, wasn't it? All the way through to the game against Southampton. Must have played so many games this year, and nearly all of them were like, oh no, got to win this one. And that takes a lot out of you. But for Salah, he keeps on, as we said, scoring those goals, not just the goals, the assists as well. So, yeah, I think if things have been slightly different after the African Cup of Nations, I think I'd have been answering Salah in the WhatsApp group. I'd have been quickest on the fingers there, but sadly it wasn't to be.
You can't help but feel, can you, Gorsty, that this little break, I mean, it obviously was heartbroken not to reach the World Cup, but this little break will do him the world of good in terms of club football.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Just because, as the point Doyle makes there, the amount of games that he's played this calendar year. He's played. I've just been looking there while you were talking, Doyle. He's played 21 for Liverpool this season, and I got halfway through counting last season. So he's played an extraordinary amount, particularly when you're adding all the minutes he will have played for Egypt as well during the Africa Cup of Nations. So yeah, maybe a few weeks off. He's been able to recharge, hasn't he? I know he played that one game for Egypt against Belgium in a win. But since then he's been on his holidays. So he'll be ready to go in Dubai, and I think it could be vital actually for Liverpool as a whole to kind of refresh and recharge, particularly with most of the squad being in Dubai. We've only got 7 at the World Cup. So it's I think it could be ideal, and we could be talking about Salah flying out of the traps next year. The start of January, talking about him being back to the levels he was at last year when he was, as we say, one of the best players in the world.
I won't lie to you, Gorsty, I didn't listen to a single word you said then because I heard Frenkie bark 5 times. It just filled me with joy. I love it.
What's he thing on this pod?
Yeah. What's he saying? Who's he voting for?
He's probably gone with Alisson. He's a student of the game. He knows his stuff. Yeah.
Plus, he won't go to the same as you, will he? Always agrees with Doyley.
No, he's weirdly voted for the cat.
Voting for the cat.
Very good.
Very good.
Like that, yeah.
Well, on that note, so a shout out to vote in the Reach Fans Footballer of the Year awards. I suppose the easiest place to go and find that vote is on our LFC Live blog. It'll be in there every day, so go and find that. Vote in both of them, and if you're from Egypt, carry on voting. Get Salah to make it a hat trick. Why not? Let's not let anyone else win this award ever nationally. Let's always make it Salah. Even when he finishes playing, let's keep winning. So yeah, we'll move on from that. Not a great deal going on this week, Liverpool-wise, but a little bit of news coming out of Boston yesterday. Gents, the Boston Globe reporting that FSG, rather than sell the club outright, are favouring a partial sale of the club to try and boost the funds for player recruitment and other such things. Gorsty, we're often called FSG apologists at the Echo, but what are your thoughts on that? Would you say that is the best outcome for all parties, or not?
It could be, couldn't it? I think if you look at the only kind of outright sale I could see Liverpool doing would be or FSG doing would be to a similar kind of American organisation in the same way that Chelsea being taken over. I think there'd be too many moral issues raised with had it been, under the arm of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia per se, or whether Qatar fancied getting involved in the Premier League. I think the LFC supporters board would be inundated with kind of a lot of concerns around that, and I think the kind of American ownership group is the most likely route towards FSG's exit strategy. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they did kind of just look to sell off a little bit of the club for investments in certain areas of the club. But I think Liverpool are really well placed, for all the kind of iffy results they've had since the start of August. Everything else about the club is so well set up. They're going to be playing in front of a 61,000 seater stadium next season. They've got a brand new training ground that's only 2 years old, £50 million structure that probably rivals anything else in Europe. On the pitch, most of the top players are tied down, aren't they? You look at the last sort of 18 months or so of contracts, they've tied down everyone, haven't they? Van Dijk, Alisson, Salah, everyone from that kind of level of player to the likes of Jota, Joe Gomez, Curtis Jones. So everywhere across the football club as a whole, aside from a small period of results in the last few months, is set up for someone to come in and just take it to the next level. And when you're looking at it and you're thinking, the only real thing that Liverpool need is just a bit of significant investment at certain times, like the summer just gone, then it paints a picture of a club who are ready to be, ready to take it all on. They're not a club who are going to need hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of investment just to kind of get a little bit further up the table. So, maybe I'm looking at it with me red tinted glasses on or whatever, but I just think there's just so many things that are going in Liverpool's favour that they're ready to kind of go again if they just get that little bit of investment right on the pitch. Because we know from Liverpool's recruitment over the last few years that when they spend big, they do get it right, and they've got the people working within the structure to get it right. So if they've got that working for them and a significant war chest, for lack of a better phrase, then I just think everything's set up for them to really challenge again.
Just playing devil's advocate a minute, Doyle, does this not, if they get investment now and sell X amount the club, and they come, they buy Bellingham, they buy whoever else with the money and make any other changes they need to make, does it not, if FSG have decided that they want to sell, or they're thinking about selling because of the likes of Newcastle now and Man City and the spending power that they have and that they can't compete, does it not just kick the can down the road a little bit further, in terms of they get them in investment, but then they're still really going to be largely the same ownership group with the same philosophies that have gotten to where they are?
Depends, doesn't it? I mean, will City and Newcastle be able to spend it the way they are? I mean, used to say there's not some kind of rule change or something happens whereby things have to move on. That's the.
Do you really believe? Sorry. Do you really believe that there will be any? I mean, financial fair play came and went.
Right, okay, let's put it this way: they're not going to be owning them forever. Is the point?
City and Newcastle.
Yeah, they're not going to be owning them forever. I mean, Newcastle
maybe not, but
taken over. But you look at City, and you just think, well, what's the end game here? What's going to happen if they are just promoting, using it as a tool to, what was the word? Legitimize. That's the word I was looking for. And promote whatever cause it is that they are. If that ever stops, or they just get bored, because that could happen. People things don't go on forever. They'll just go, well, we fancy a change. Now, the problem that FSG have got is whether or not they feel as though they want to hang around should that ever happen. And the fact, it was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, that it first came out in Boston that the Boston Globe, a newspaper owned by John Henry, so you'd like to think that they know what they're talking about, they said that they were open to a partial sale or somebody, buying a part of the club or shareholdership in the club, not necessarily a full sale. And I think FSG would want that, because then they get investments from somebody who probably they find someone who's going to be a silent partner and doesn't want to have a big say. Because if someone hands over hundreds of millions of pounds, they want to have a bit of a say in the club. And it seems unrealistic to suggest that FSG would still be owning it the way that they would be. So there's going to be a change regardless, whether it's the manner in which they own it or them owning it full stop. So, yeah, I do think that I don't think FSG want to let go of Liverpool because it's such a valuable asset for them, and it could become even more valuable now that that as Gorsty said, the Anfield Road end will be finished next season. Next summer, and ready for next season, and they could be getting more money in. And who's to say that Liverpool don't go on and win a few more trophies and their brand becomes even more commercially viable, so they can earn even more money off that, and the club has an even greater value that in 3 or 4 years they can sell it for even more. That's the hope. Well, these are business people. That's the decision they make. Maybe they've thought that now's a good time to not sell it, but explore and see just how much the club's actually worth, which I think is what they're doing at the moment, rather than just actively looking to sell it. But I think they'll be very reluctant to hand over the club as a whole, and that's why I think they probably prefer to have an outside investment coming in and helping them along. But we've seen that can cause problems with ultimately that's what happened to George Gillette. I'm not saying this is going to happen now, but George Gillette wanted to own Liverpool, couldn't get enough money, got Tom Hicks involved, and we all saw what happened then.
Of course, do you think that perhaps in the last few weeks since the news broke that they were considering investments or selling the club outright, that perhaps they've had a little look at the types of people that have come to the table and decided that there's no one A, serious enough, or B, perhaps good enough to own Liverpool, or to make that buy?
Yeah, quite possibly. We know that Mike Gordon's kind of taken a step back, hasn't he, from the day-to-day running of Liverpool to oversee essentially what's on the table, and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley have been no doubt working overtime to assess the lay of the land. And maybe that is. I've got no doubt that FSG would think long and hard at every kind of serious proposal. And I think there'd be a number of quite significant checkpoints for them to have to pass before they think these are custodians who are going to keep Liverpool well run and at the top of the game. I don't think that I mean, they're obviously hard-nosed American business people, and I don't for one second think that they came to be owners of Liverpool just by wistfully looking at pictures of the cop on YouTube or whatever. I do think that it was a serious business thing towards it, but I don't think that they'd be willing to just hand over the keys to anyone. I do think that they will have a certain level of, they want to see Liverpool continuing to prosper, even when they're not owners. They probably have become fans as a result of their ownership, haven't they? It'd be strange to think that they hadn't. They'd have to be really kind of stone-hearted for them to just continue to think of it as an out-and-out business. And maybe that kind of, mark that they've put in has not been reached by anyone who's come forward. So there's there's a few elements at play out there. We know that they're looking for 4 billion. If there is to be an outright change of hands. Now you're wondering who's got that kind of money, who's going to come in and pass all the kind of moral dilemmas that might come up as a result, and also have the similar kind of philosophies. But that's why I go back to thinking that it might be a good idea just to bring another kind of Redbird on board, as it were. We know Redbird bought it directly into FSG, didn't he? But if it was another kind of American, hedge fund or whatever, and they promised to put down X amount of money for this, that, and the other, I think that might still be Liverpool's best course of action going forward. But as Dodie says, it's just a case of, once you're at that point, is it already the beginning of the end of your overall ownership? But maybe they just haven't found anyone at the moment who ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, well, it's certainly very interesting. We'll see how it develops over the next weeks and months. But before we wrap this podcast up, we've got some user questions, viewer questions, listener questions.
User questions.
The instruction manual. They've mostly come to you, Gorsty, and most of them have come in the form of statements, which is always fun. But I will make them into questions. So I'll do the hard work for them. So you know what, we've just kind of discussed it, but we'll just quickly go over it again. We got one question to our YouTube channel from Mass A. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That just says, would a partial sale than selling all your shares later on, quicker than out. Is that quicker than outright full sale of the club? So I suppose that makes sense, doesn't it? In terms of them wanting to maybe test the water, see what a new partner's like, Ghosty, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't know about that. I mean, that'd be more one for Dave Powell, I guess, who's our business of football writer.
Yeah.
It's the only thing we'd have to go on is looking at other clubs who've had similar kind of issues with either total outright sales or partial investments coming on board. I mean, you look at Mike Ashley. Was he looking to sell Newcastle for years and years? Some Bill Kenwright was looking for an Everton investor for years, wasn't he? And before Farhad Moshiri showed up. So I don't know, in all honesty. I'd imagine that it'd be quicker to sell some of the shares than it would be an outright sale. But I wouldn't necessarily profess to be an expert on that aspect of football, I guess.
Something like how long is a piece of string? These sorts of things. Yeah. It depends on the individuals involved, the number of shares, and many other factors. But it's certainly going to be interesting. Doyley, Harad Key says perfect signing for Liverpool is Frenkie de Jong. They should not hesitate that signing. Comment.
That's a statement from the.
That is a statement, but I mean, put that in a form of question. Is he the sort of profile of midfielder that they need? I mean, we know that they need midfield recruits, and we'll get onto another certain name in a minute, which we've got a few questions on. But Frenkie de Jong obviously was, a man in demand in the summer. Liverpool's name sort of came in. It never really felt seriously, did it? But is he the sort of profile you think that would work in that midfield?
Don't really know enough about him, to be honest. Haven't seen enough of him playing. In terms of his profile, his age and teams he's playing for and his position, then yeah, but it's a bit more to it than that. So I mean, but Liverpool have shown in the past that when they decide on a player, the type of player, they tend to go after them and they don't kind of deviate too much from it. Mm-hmm. And if he is somebody that fits the profile that they're looking for, then yeah, he'll be an option, because they're going to look at all the options, because they will be signing one, possibly two midfielders in the next 1 or 2 transfer windows.
Just to kind of give me own 2 cents on that, I think he would be ideal for Liverpool. To be honest, I think he's only 25. The only issue is he doesn't particularly seem that keen on leaving Barcelona, even though he decided to move heaven and earth to get rid of them to Manchester United, didn't he, in the summer? That was one that really dragged on every single day, wasn't it? But maybe he just didn't fancy to going to United at the time. They were a little bit in the doldrums with so much uncertainty over the managerial thing and whatever else. Liverpool, much more stable footing on the whole. But, given his quality and his age, I think he'd be an ideal fit for Liverpool's midfield. Someone who can carry the ball over quite large distances, 20, 30 yards. He's also got a great eye for a pass. Given what Liverpool need, that little bit more dynamism in midfield, I think he'd be great for them. The only issue is he going to cost 80, 90 million euros or pounds?
Could be wrong.
He's played 157 games for Barcelona. I've just been looking. Yeah. You can tell that the league is not a Sky anymore. I don't watch it.
do you not think
that's one reason why I haven't seen him play? And Barcelona haven't been particularly great in the Champions League. So there you go.
Do you not think, and this is to either one of you, the way Liverpool operate and the fact that they would have liked to have signed Tchouaméni in the summer? Go on, say it again.
No.
I don't think I'll ever get that name right. But yeah, do you not think, given the fact that Liverpool were willing to spend the money on another player, had they wanted Frenkie de Jong in the way that Barcelona, and I know he was digging his heels in over, I think, unpaid wages, that sort of thing, but the fact that Barcelona were open to selling, would Liverpool not have entered the race for him already had they wanted to buy him? Do you not think?
Possibly, yeah. But I don't know how much of an issue the whole contract thing was. It was just noise, wasn't it, to us? We don't really cover it in great detail. Obviously, it's not Liverpool related at the time. It just sounded like Barcelona was trying to kick him out the back door, and he held on because he hadn't been paid X amount of money in wages, and it just seemed to be a lot of issues there, which Liverpool probably not too keen to get involved in. Maybe that was one of the sticking points. I think quality-wise, as I say, I think he'd be ideal for them. But then again, it's very un-Liverpool, isn't it, to just go and take a player from Barcelona. I think we'll declare our interest in a player at Barcelona and bring him high-profile player. And that's not really how they work, is it really?
Well, sticking with you, Gorsty, we obviously have several questions about a player who does fit the bill for Liverpool, which is Jude Bellingham. We've all had a chance to watch him more regularly during this World Cup, and I think it's fair to say he has impressed. What do you believe the latest is on him? Is it a case of, is he somebody they could go for in January? Is it a case of waiting on investment? Where do Liverpool stand when it comes to Jude Bellingham at the moment?
Yeah, I can't see anything happening in January, if we're being honest. I think Dortmund are very keen to keep him for as long as they can, and I'd be absolutely astonished if Liverpool were able to do something.
Just interject, is there any chance of a sneaky little Naby Keita agreement in advance type deal?
I mean, that's possibly a little bargaining chip that Liverpool have got, but Keita can talk to clubs.
Sorry, no, I meant like they signed Naby Keita a year in advance.
Yeah. I mean, that was an unusual deal, wasn't it? Like Liverpool have done anything before it or since in terms of announcing a player. It was about 10 months before he eventually signed, wasn't it? They announced him on August bank holiday, and he came in the following summer at the start of July for pre-season training. I've seen a few people kind of mention that as a possible example of why they could be able to do it with Bellingham. I'm not sure, really. We know that Dortmund are desperate to keep him on. It was interesting listening to, I can't remember the guy's name now, he's the managing director of Dortmund who was speaking in Vietnam this week. And Carson Kramer, was it, or something?
Yeah.
He basically said, we like Liverpool, we respect Jürgen, and we're still in touch with them, but we're not going to be giving Liverpool any gifts. And we expect nothing less, of course. But Liverpool keen admirers of him. It was interesting being in the press conference the day before the Southampton game, and one of the journalists asked Klopp, essentially, will the uncertainty around the club mean that you're going to be able to go for players like Jude Bellingham in the summer? And Klopp didn't even flicker. He just answered the question. It wasn't even, well, why are you asking about him? He plays for Dortmund and whatever else. He just answered the question. So I think it is a bit of an open secret at this point that Liverpool are massive admirers of him. The problem is 19-year-old England international who seems to have it all. They're not going to be the only ones who like him, are they? I just wonder whether the boat was missed in terms of last summer when so many of the top clubs signed central midfielders and weren't necessarily looking for further additions, whether that won't be the case next summer when the window opens.
I've got a slight concern when it comes to Jude Bellingham, Doyle, and I wondered whether you share it, is that if Liverpool do eventually get him, there's going to be so much pressure on him because of the build-up to this potential transfer. As Gorsty's just pointed out, he's 19. He's obviously a very, very, very good player, but it's rare that one player that young can transform a total midfield. Do you not think that Liverpool fans could be placing too much expectation on one man's shoulders?
Don't be worrying about that. Just be worrying about signing him first.
Well, yeah, but this is in my hypothetical. If they do sign him,
well, we don't do hypotheticals on the Blood Red podcast. Come on, Joe.
It's the World Cup. There's not a lot to talk about. Well,
absolute. We don't. Well, what happens?
We absolutely don't have a lot of other things to talk about.
Well, mercifully, we will never write any stories on Jude Bellingham and not put any extra pressure on him should he ever join Liverpool.
Well, he can't come looking at us. So you're not.
No, we'll be fussed at all. No, none whatsoever.
All right. Well, there's another man on this podcast, so I'll just throw the same question at you, Gorsty.
There
you go.
Maybe to an extent. He seems to.
I don't agree with it.
He's just answering the question.
I think I made the point. I can't remember whether I wrote it now or said it, or maybe I've just thought it. But he seems to be. He'll cover all the ills, won't he? Sign him, and then he's just like a magic wand. And I think Liverpool's midfield problems go a bit deeper than the signing of just one player now. No, however good he is. I was actually looking at the options today on the club's official site, and it's just so both ends of the spectrum. You've got Harvey Elliott and Carvalho, and at the other end you've got Henderson and Thiago and Milner, who are all, early to mid 30s. Curtis Jones is down the other end with Elliott. The only one who's kind of in his prime at the moment is Fabinho, and I think there might be something in that as to why his form has kind of tailed off, because he's probably getting too much asked of him. Naby Keita's into the final few months of his deal. Oxlade-Chamberlain is. Milner only signed a 1-year extension. So Liverpool will need more than just one midfielder. And I think maybe this is why FSG have looked at it actually and thought we're best looking at what we can bring into the club here, because we can't afford, one top midfielder now is anywhere between 60 and 100 million, isn't it? And Liverpool need 2 and maybe even 3. So I do think that there is this thing that, if Liverpool get Bellingham, everything will be fine and they'll be back to kind of where they were, 6 or 7 months ago. For how good he is, I think Liverpool will need a couple more in that area next summer.
Okay, well, I've got 2 more questions for you both here before we say goodbye. One of them, Doyley, is there's been a lot of worry about the impact of Ian Graham, whose departure was announced alongside that of Julian Ward's last week. His departure, a lot of worries around that. Do you think they're well placed?
Well, they're going to replace him if they haven't already, because I think Ian Graham handed his notice in, wasn't it, in the summer? So they gave him a year's notice. So I wouldn't be too worried about that, no.
No, Doyley's not worried, Gorsty. Are you worried about?
Possibly. I mean, it's one of those areas of the club, isn't it? That, not a lot of us know a whole lot about. You kind of rank and file supporter will have absolutely no idea what Ian Graham does behind the scenes, and we're only a little bit more clued up because we cover the club day in, day out. I mean, he's the head of research, isn't he? So he's the head of that department, but it's a 6-man department. Tim Waskett and Dafford Steer, Will Spearman, a couple of marks in there as well, whose names are escaping me at the moment. Maybe it's a case of promoting from within, the way Liverpool have done, with Julian Ward coming in for Michael Edwards. Maybe it's a case of Will Spearman, for example, who been always kind of highly rated in that kind of data sphere, if you like. Maybe it's a case of him moving up. I don't know, but there is. I can see why there would be some trepidation as to why I believe him, for people who a little bit more tuned in as to what he does. I was at the StatsBomb conference when he was guest speaking a little over a year ago, and it was fascinating, kind of detailing how they work. I remember him doing like a kind of hypothetical. We're on the search for the striker, and we've only got 25 to 30 million to play with. These are the list of the strikers across Europe, but we can't go for them because he's too old, injury prone. He'll cost too much, probably not good enough. And he whittled it down to he got to about 2 or 3 options, and then it was like, so these are the people who we go to the scouting department with and recommend, and then possibly they look into it a little bit more, watching them live and whatever else. And it was really fascinating the way he detailed it. And I know that their work is mostly honed towards recruitment, and he's one of the absolute leaders of his field. But possibly Liverpool will have a contingency plan with, promoting from within. I'm not sure. That's just me kind of hazarding a little bit of a guess. But in terms of, you hesitate to use the word normal supporter, but you traditional fan, I guess, I wouldn't be getting too worried, I guess.
My quick theory.
Data sphere is a great word, by the way. Data sphere is a very good word. What I would say is, as they are replacing him, I don't think there's anybody suggesting that Liverpool are ditching analytics, whether that's in terms of preparation for games or transfers, that's very much wide of the mark, as they say. And as one of our former colleagues, he'd probably call it hogwash. So I think it's fair to say Liverpool are still carrying on using analytics like every other major team is. So, it's served Liverpool so well so far. Why on earth would they choose to stop using it?
My quick theory on this is, it's not so much.
Is it a hypothetical theory or is it a real one?
It's not. It's not so much the people who are departing. But I'm not saying that they're not very, very good at the job. I'm sure they are. But I always think of it as the assistant manager, everyone said Buvac leaving 2018, was it, when he left? And they'd say he's he quite literally was he the eyes or the brain? I always get confused.
He was the brain.
So he quite literally the brains behind Jurgen Klopp was leaving, and Klopp's magic would wear off, and lo and behold, he was absolutely fine. And Pep Linders is now rated as high, if not higher, than Buvac ever was. And I think people put a lot on these people that they don't see work in the daily basis. And like you say, Gorsty, there's a team of 6 people there, and Ian Graham, I'm sure, was brilliant, as Julian Ward, as Michael Edwards was. But they'll move on, and there'll be other people that they can promote and give jobs to that I'm sure could do a very good job. So I think it's my worry is more the why they are leaving rather than who's leaving, because for 2 fairly big names in that team to leave at once, it would be interesting to know why they've made that decision, especially Julian Ward after, well, it'll just be a year in the role, won't it, once he does depart. So it's an interesting one. And finally, one more question. Sven Mislintat, I think that's how you pronounce it. It could be wrong. Was obviously at Dortmund with Klopp. Had a role in the signings of the likes of Lewandowski, Aubameyang, Hummels, Gundogan, some of the biggest stars that played for Klopp at Dortmund, and then was at Arsenal as well, and didn't do so well. Has been linked with the role, but Doyle, it feels very much like a Mr. Mislintat linking himself with Liverpool rather than the other way around. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, and then of course, then the following day, he was on. Some reports in Germany were unlinking him. So
were they? I didn't see them.
Yeah, whether or not, I don't know. It's just a start, isn't it? Let's face it. Julian Ward it was confirmed he was going last week. So we've got an awful lot more of this to come. So until Liverpool do announce who's replaced him, if indeed they do decide to replace and bring in a sporting director, because obviously they're doing the review of the whole way things are going, the whole process of football operations, which will include the transfers. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't bring one in, because it's worked so well for them over the past, 7-8 years. Certainly with Jurgen Klopp there, and he's used to it. So wait and see. But yeah, it looks as though Mr. Sven and his lovely hair, he probably premature linking him in terms of actual interest from Liverpool at the very most.
And Ghosty, do you think it would be one where they'll go and recruit from outside, or because that brings its own change, doesn't it? A new man presumably wants to bring in new people, or do you think it's one where they might look to promote from within and look to continue the success that they've had?
Yeah, I'm not really sure who's there now to promote from within. David Woodfine took over the Loan Pathways manager, didn't he? And I know he had a hand in bringing in Luis Diaz in January. He was part of the delegation that flew out to Argentina, was it, when they kind of cobbled together the medical there? Possibly that's one area that they'll look at. But I think if they do if they do recruit externally, I think it'll have to be under the guise of, you're not going to be talking in the same way that Julian Ward and Michael Edwards do, or didn't. It's very much their personality to shun the spotlight. Now, would an external sporting director have a similar ethos? Because I know that they speak quite regularly on the continents in Italy or Spain or Germany, that they're often quite outspoken, and more often than not you've heard of them, even though you don't follow that club. We all know, we could name a few, couldn't we? The likes of Monchi and one or two others who have become personalities in their own right. I don't think Klopp would be too happy with that, because he likes to keep a lid on things, certainly around transfers. So if they've got a sporting director who's speaking regularly to whoever it would be, I think that might cause a little bit of a rock in the boat situation, and Donald Klopp would be too keen with that. So maybe that's one of the aspects that you might take into consideration. But like Dory says, I don't think they're looking too closely at it at the moment. They've got a busy couple of weeks coming up in Dubai, and then the return to competitive action is going to be absolutely chocker for months. So Julian Ward's still got to navigate a massively important January as the sporting director.
Spot on. Well, cheers, gents. That's all for now. We'll be back on Monday to discuss England-Senegal, I'm sure, and look ahead to that trip to Dubai. So thanks very much for listening, and see you then.